Element of 596A presentations for Spring 1. We have 6 interesting topics on slate for today's presentation, so we'll get started with those here in just a minute. Want to thank all of you for taking time out of your day to show up for our presentations. I know everyone appreciates that. Each presenter will have 25 minutes to present and then 5 minutes for questions and answers. For the presenters, as you receive questions in the chat window, please make sure to speak the question before you respond, so the question gets recorded. And for those that want to ask questions, if you could type your questions in, perhaps ongoing with the presentation, just kind of help streamline the whole time process. So with that, I think we're ready to start. So first up is Claudette. So Claudette, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and start your presentation.
Okay, great, thank you. Hi, everybody, good morning. I am Claudette Sandoval-Green, and the title of my project is Remote Sensing for Primate Conservation, how the critically endangered savanna chimpanzee competes for space with multi-scale gold mines in Kédougou, Senegal. And my advisor is Dr. J.B. Sharma. So a little bit about me. I work full-time at Iowa State University in the Department of Agricultural and Biosystems Engineering as a GIS database developer. I've been in that department for about 8 years in different titles. I have undergraduate degrees in animal ecology, biology, zoo animal technology, and as my bona fides for having an interest in chimpanzees, in another life, I was a zookeeper for cats and primates. So, and then this diagram over here to the left, I like to describe it as my headspace for assisting in any of these other topics as a conservation GIS analyst. So my presentation overview, I'll be talking about goals and objectives, background of the study area, proposed methodology, anticipated results, next steps, project value, project timeline, and possible conference venue or publication, and questions. So to start with the spatial problem, well, there are not many remote sensing studies for primate conservation. So it's no surprise that no one has looked at the effects of multi-scale gold mining degradation on forest galleries in Kédougou, Senegal. The forest galleries are high quality habitat for the critically endangered savanna chimpanzee, and perhaps even more so now as climate change shifts habitats and behaviors. So the trees are hugely important. They're critical habitat for the survival of chimpanzees across the entire spectrum of subspecies for chimpanzees. So the objective of the project is to show land cover and land use change in the forest galleries that are near 3 different types of mining development from the 1980s to the present. Also to create a habitat suitability model to predict where the chimpanzees might be today and where they might be in the future. And the goal is to assist primatologists with primate conservation, forest monitoring, preservation, and restoration. A little background on Senegal. It's slightly larger than South Dakota. The population is 16.88 million. It is the westernmost country on the African continent, and southeastern Senegal has been experiencing a gold extraction boom for more than 10 years now. And over here in the southeast, you can see right here, this is where the chimpanzees are. So the gold mining boom presents a great challenge for primate conservation because the mining brings new levels of anthropogenic disturbances and ecological pressures. The disturbances can include loss of group connectivity, loss of connectivity to habitat, preference, and protected areas due to mining road construction, mining pits, pond tailings, fencing development, and forest degradation. And furthermore, gold mining brings mercury contaminated water. And the picture to the right shows a group of chimpanzees drinking from a polluted artisanal mining pit. So in my study area, I see 3 different kinds of mines. I see a large-scale gold mine, which is an industrial mining operation with trained employees using large-scale mechanized tools to extract the gold quickly The investors are foreign and West African. There is an intermediate scale gold mine, which is basically a large scale artisanal mine, but it just has more infrastructure to it. And then there's the gold scale artisanal gold mine, or de jure, and this is a cultural subsistence mining. It's basically gold panning with iron tools or small power machines. The investors are traditional local people, and the de jures have been culturally present for millennia. I'll be looking at the Mako mine. This is the large scale mine up here. And then the intermediate mine is called Bantakokuta. And then these small scale de jures are basically just kind of pockmarked all over the place. A little bit about the chimps. So they are called the savanna chimpanzee or western chimpanzee. The genus species is Pantroglodytes varus. They were listed as critically endangered in 2016. The next categories are extinct in the wild and extinct. They have a unique suite of behaviors that are adapted for open, hot, dry, and mosaic environments. They termite fish and hunt galagas with spears that they fashion themselves. They utilize microclimates such as closed vegetation, also called forest galleries, caves, and pools for cooling off. The dry season is the harshest time of the year for them, where temperatures can reach up to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Only 2% of their habitat is forested. They would rather be in a forest gallery during the dry season because there is water, food, shade, and tall evergreen trees for nesting. Also, the savanna chimpanzee adaptations help us to understand how our last common ancestor survived in an open, hot, dry, and mosaic environment. So here's my study area. Basically, it's two different sites. I'll be starting locally with a local watershed. And within that local watershed is the intermediate mine right here. And there are basically two chip groups here, the Fongoli and the Bonton group. And then I'll be scaling up my workflow to a regional watershed that encapsulates the large scale mine as well here. This is the Mako mine. And what's interesting about the Mako mine is that it's right next to a national park. And the national park is a protected area. And of course, everything outside of that is non-protected. And you can see where the chimpanzee groups would rather be. Okay, so a little bit about my data. Senegal is a highly mosaic environment. The dry season is from November to May. The wet season is from June to October. And primatologists have been trying to come up with a definition for what a savanna is in this area. So they start with closed vegetation is evergreen, gallery, riparian, or thicket forest. The trees there are generally greater than 6 meters. And then there's the ecotone, which is a transitional space where the vegetation is not mostly open or closed. And then there's open vegetation, which is deciduous, woodland grasslands, and grasslands. And trees are mostly 2 to 6 meters, but some are 15 to 20 meters too. So a little bit about the data that I'm going to be collecting. I'm going to start with Planet Lab as part of their NICFI program. This is Norway's International Climate and Forest Initiative, where if you're doing any kind of study on forest degradation, you can get less than 5 meter data for free. And so I'll be using that, and also Sentinel-2 at 10 meter and Landsat at 30 meter, and probably pulling, using the DEM from the NASA LPDAC. And some pictures at the bottom show you just how hard it is to classify this environment because it is extremely mosaic. Okay, here's my workflow. I'm going to start by pulling the DEM, derive a watershed and stream network for the local and regional area. I'll get the satellite imagery from the Planet Lab, also Sentinel, Landsat, create composites, subset to the watershed boundaries for local and regional sites, adjust coordinate systems, do some data exploration to see what I have there, and then segmentation and unsupervised classification in eCognition using the satellite imagery, a stream network, the DEM, vegetation height, and then indices for soil, vegetation, and water. I'll be classifying closed vegetation, open vegetation, ecotone, barren, burn sites, development, and water. And I'll be starting with the local first, and then scaling this up to the regional and looking from the time period between the 80s to the present. And then everything gets exported over into ArcPro, where I will use their land cover and land use change analysis, and then their accuracy analysis, and then do some map compositions, tables, figure creation. And then last, I'm going to take the classification for 2023 and some chimpanzee nesting points that I acquired from Dr. Jill Preetz, and use that to train ArcPro's presence-only prediction model, also called MaxENT. And this does a habitat suitability model, and somebody just produced a paper now this year, 2023, using this model to try and do one for chimpanzees. So there's a recipe there for me to follow. Also, more map compositions, tables, figure creations, and then analysis of results and discussion. I wanted to show you guys an example of what an eCognition rule set looks like. And this is from my final project in 883. I took a look at the Mako mine for 2016 and 2020. And just to give you an idea of what the hierarchy is, you basically start with pre-processing and then classifying the segmentation, and you can do some refinement, and then everything gets exported out. So this was pretty much my first for real run. And I wanted to say a little bit more about the watershed, deriving a watershed. So Senegal is an extremely difficult place to get current publicly available elevation data. Getting the watershed boundary and stream network right or better is extremely important for my project. I think it's the primary layer. I took a look at the 2.5 meter dam that's at the ALOS Pulsar RTC for the Alaska Satellite Facility. And that's basically just a resampled 30 meter DEM, and their literature says to not use this, this data for anything at all other than what it's meant to be, and that's they used it for some corrections on their product. So stay away from that. I also looked at the HydroShed version 1 a derived watershed, and that's at 90 meters. It's pretty coarse. And then there's also the HydroShed version 2 that's from a for real 2.5 meter dam, but this data has not been released yet, and their website says early 2023. So I'm sure a lot of people are anxiously waiting for that. But this is what I have so far, and my husband's a hydrologist, and he's helping me derive these stream networks. And so he produced this one for me, and you can see that it's okay, but it's not great. You can see that it's not, it doesn't follow the Gambia River very well, but I may end up having to just use this anyway. Okay, so anticipated results. First, I wanted to show you this animated DVM of the dry season there from 1984, 1990, 2000, 2014, and 2022. This is basically when the vegetation drops the leaves. But you can still see the forest galleries in these images in the yellow and green along the stream hydrology. And that's what I'm going for. So the results may show that the remaining critical habitat left to protect from mining runoff and timber extraction. The results should open up discussions about where savanna chimpanzee habitat should be preserved and connected. If not, is there an alternate habitat for their future? The results may show habitat from the past that can be restored. The results may show that forest galleries are not degrading. And if I can, I hope to bring good news. So the next steps are, I need to make a determination on which watershed I'm going to use so that I can go forward, whether it's the 30 meter, the 90 meter, or if I get lucky and the 2.5 meter DEM gets released. But regardless, I am going to finish up my GEOG 871 class first, and then I will proceed on my research project 100%. So the project value, this project will answer the following questions. How have the forest galleries changed since the expansion of gold mining in the study area? Where is the habitat suitable for savanna chimpanzees in the study area today? This remote sensing results will assist conservation science researchers in Kédougou, Senegal. The project demonstrates how the GIS and remote sensing community can collaborate with other disciplines to help with the creation of actionable geospatial data that can be translated into local policy for forest gallery monitoring. And possible conference venue or publication. If there's anything of value there, if I can get this published, I wanted to make sure that it goes to a remote sensing community first, because I think these group of people need to be put on notice that primate people need help right now with remote sensing work. And then also for my presentation, I can present at the Society for Conservation GIS in August. And here's my timeline. I'm going to finish up my GEOG 871 class, and then this summer I'm going to work on my remote sensing research, and then register for 596B in the fall, and then finish up my MGIS program. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Claudette. That was great.
Thanks.
Like your little video here. While we're waiting for folks to type a question or two in the chat window, I was wondering, you mentioned issues about the gold mining operations. Are you, or do you have evidence of how these mines have changed? Have new mines popped up over the years? Are these more or less fixed in location? In other words, the locational variation of the mine, is that a factor in your consideration?
Yes. So I kind of glazed over the mining portion. The hardest part about this whole entire project is that you have to be an expert in, chimps and also mining. But the Mako mine is pretty new. I believe it's like less than 5 years old. Definitely less than 10. And the intermediate mine has been there for a very long time. It's more like a cultural thing, but it's expanding, it's growing. And then there's another new one that's way north, and that's the Sabodala mine. And they're all coming to this one area because there's these chimps are sitting on top of gold, literally. There's like a big geological seam there that's value that they want to extract the gold from this area. So they're probably going to continue to put in more mines for sure. I'm sure there are plans for many more. Yeah.
So is there, I know with like coal mines, I mean, there is a lifespan for a mine, like right. A coal mine. Is that still exist for gold mines too?
I think so. Yes. And it's not just on extraction, it's on management.
Yeah.
So a lot of these mines fail because they're changing hands pretty quickly as on ownership.
Right.
That's happening to the Mako mine too. The Mako mine is actually started off as pretty much doing a good job of watching the environment and helping the community out and things like that, and really staying involved. And I think they still are, from what I've read. I'm not there, but this mine has also been sold to another company, and we're not exactly sure if they're going to pick up the same management as the last ownership. So,
right,
of the environment. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thanks for your response. There's looks like two questions you have in the chat window.
Okay, let me stop sharing so I can see them. Hold on. Chat. Okay. Have you looked at using any GIS resources from the Jane Goodall Institute? Could that be helpful in any way? Funny you should say that. So I've worked on this for another project, but that project was a little less than 10 years ago. And I do have some data from the Jane Goodall Institute. I have some satellite imagery, some worldview from 2017, and I might put that in there also into eCognition. But yes, I definitely feel comfortable about going back and asking them for some more imagery if I get to that point. So you bet. So I met Dr. Pintia at a conference, and he's more than willing to give satellite imagery. And let's see, I may have missed this, but is poaching? Oh yeah, poaching is a threat for sure. There are lots of different threats there. Yep. Also, is there tourism? Is there a tourism draw for these chimpanzees that would be enough of a reason for the government to want to protect them? I don't think I do. Well, I think maybe they do a little like small tourism, nothing big right now. There's a lot of mining going on in this area in the community, especially with the small artisanal mines. And I just don't think it's very conducive for like a tourism industry there. Maybe I'm wrong. This group in Fongoli is the first habituated group. But that's strictly for research right now. And I think Dr. Preetz does bring in some people, scientists, and she'll do like small tours, but it's not a good idea for her research or the chimps really. These chimps have been around people for millennia. They do a good job, a really good job of surviving among people. And then also kind of a unique thing about Senegal is that the poaching tends to come from outsiders. So a lot of outsiders are coming in to work in Senegal, to work at the mines. They don't follow the same ethos, the same traditions. But the Senegalese people do not hunt the chimpanzees because they see them as part of their totem, as young boys who have fled into the forest who refuse to be circumcised. So they have a respect for them, and it's kind of mutual between the chimps and people, and they don't do a lot of hunting of chimps there. So that's kind of unique about the area. Anything else? Oh, was there another one? Let's see. Great project. What a hard, yes, it is. It's very hard to read all of this. Very, very hard. Thanks.
All right, Claudette, thank you very much.
Cool, thank you.
If you could just put your email in the chat so that if someone has a follow-up question, they contact you later, that'd be great.
Okay, great, thanks.
And then next up, we have Carrie Johnston.
Yep, let me get this situated real quick.
All right, we see your screen, we can hear you. So whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and start.
Can you still see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I went to presenter view. Sometimes that does some weird things.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Thanks. Okay, hi, my name is Carrie Johnston, and this is my capstone presentation idea, which I intend to build a interactive job searching web map where I will be using web scrape data from LinkedIn and Indeed. This is a brief outline of what this presentation will entail. We'll start with a very brief introduction and move into the current landscape of job web maps and what's out there currently. And then we move into some of the technical requirements to make this project a successful one. And finally, ending with my workflow, development timeline, and my potential presentation venues. So to start, my project is exactly what the title says. I intend to build an interactive web map that will use scraped web data from Indeed and possibly LinkedIn to create visualizations and functionality for GIS job seekers. This project will house an inventory of data collected over time to build salary distribution data sets, emerging skill and education trends for particular regions, and other relevant job seeking data. It will expose this information to the public in a visual and interactive and location-based system that will help GIS job seekers level the playing field in terms of knowing what their skills are worth while navigating traditional sites that sometimes do not include this information. Moving into the current landscape of what's out there in terms of GIS or job web maps. So in order to qualify that this is something that is not currently out there, and that's something that we can, fit into niche-wise, let's take a look at the current landscapes of job-related web mapping and the tools associated with those. First, most established job web map and employment tools, things created by organizations like CareerArc, Mappertunity, and Recruitix, are reliant on internally submitted data. They have their own submission standards, and the data they ingest is static in format And these things tend to be easier to build off in the long run. What I mean by static is that they are ingesting these data sets through submissions, and it is not live data that they are using for their platforms. Secondly, and most importantly, the client of these corporations are the employer and not the employee, and have been designed with that in mind. Let's take a look at some of these systems that are currently out there on the internet. The first one I want to go through is Mappertunity. Mappertunity is a platform website that uses Google Maps to create a location-based media to connect employers and employees in a specified area. The way this works is by uploading either your resume or qualifications as a job seeker or a job post as an employer. The user then can set a search radius, let's say in this case 30 miles, sorry, and all qualified or candidates/jobs meeting a certain criteria will become visible to each other. I fondly call this the Tinder of job searching. And by that, I mean this is proximity-based job searching. You're able to view a list of applicants and pick ones that you think will be best fit for your position, and vice versa for job seekers and job posts. Despite this lighthearted jest, this is a very interesting tool. The platform is a disruptor of the recruiter industry as it attempts to replace the intermediary of the recruiter with its system, allowing job seekers and employers the opportunity to see and contact each other directly. The second platform that's out there is a website or company called CareerArc. CareerArc is a social recruiting one-stop shop that includes creating web maps for global entities, like the Starbucks web map that's pictured in this slide. The information provided by CareerArc is strictly for employers' engagement with potential candidates. Things they provide include targeted advertisements to potential candidates, analytics to see how well the system is working for that recruiter, brand development and image projection, and of course the web map creation, which embeds into the client's own ATS system, which is like an HR system, job application system. All of this information infers a static and standardized data ingestion that is submitted by the company and not something that is taken from the internet to best optimize the information that they put out. Most importantly, CareerArc works for the employer and therefore will strive to put the best foot forward for that company in building its brand and its engagement. This brings up a question of image versus reputation, where the image is something that CareerArc is paid to optimize, and what the company that is paying CareerArc probably wants the best, image out there. And the reputation may be more of an interest to the employer of a given, or employee of a given employer. Finally, we can look at Google Maps. Google Maps is a really interesting example of something that is not a dedicated job searching web map, but through its own functionality, users have leveraged it into a piecewise way of creating a job searching resource. What they basically do, and what's pictured on the screen right now, is they search in a given area, say Denver, Colorado, and they look up GIS jobs. They just search it into the maps, and what'll pop up are these pins that represent recruiters and also GIS firms. If you go a little bit deeper into the listings here, you'll actually find underneath of these things job posts for GIS jobs for certain areas. This comes close to what I envisioned for my own project in that it provides these clickable links to actual job sites. It falls short, however, that there isn't anything past the surface. There's no visualization of salary data. There's no comparison. There's no additional tools for users to take advantage of. And it doesn't provide a comprehensive list of work in that area. If you were to look at the map on the screen right now, and then you were to look on, let's say, Indeed for posts in Denver, you would find a pretty large discrepancy in the number of jobs being posted on Indeed versus what we see now on Google Maps. So with these systems in mind, this is how I intend to fit into the gap within the currently established job web mapping landscape. First, this will be designed with the intention of giving the GIS job seeker the tools to know their worth. This means estimated salary based on locational information, historical info, how often are skills referenced in a certain region that a person is looking for a GIS job, how should a GIS job user even tailor their skills development to land somewhere that they want to be or somewhere that they want to be. All this information will be available to the job seeker, visualized and intuitive, and I bet also very enticing for most GIS users to play around with a very powerful GIS interactive map while they are searching for a job. Finally, this information will be updated and living. The historical data will be housed as opposed to the current system, which will take in standardized data requests. This system I propose to build, after extensive research on the topic, does not currently exist to the best of my knowledge. Well, moving into the technology requirements and what will actually make this this project go, basically. And to start, to start a brief introduction into the whole of the project. Coding in Python will be an integral part of this assignment. The web scraper will be coded in Python, as well as most of the text-based analysis required for transforming things like city names into mappable data points. This will cut down on active mapping time and will be key to producing consistent visualization products. Web mapping will also play a larger role. In order for this project to be successful, speed will be necessary to keep a user's attention and be effective enough to be worth using. The functionality needs to be there in order for it to be a useful tool. Finally, the process of updating this on the daily or even a regular time period will pose one of the biggest challenges, as this data is living. Hence, the focus on automating as many tasks as possible so that that kind of information can be sweated out in the project. So to start, this is one of the more important portions of the project, and I anticipate it is probably going to take the most amount of time developing, and that is the web scraping portion of this. To give a brief background for those who don't know, web scraping is essentially just taking information, data that is on a website or another media and putting it into a tabular format, making it easier to work with for people like data scientists or just anybody that's curious about statistics that are on a certain website. There are pre-built web scrapers out there, such as Octoparse. An example of a Octoparse web scraping workflow being completed is pictured on the screen in the Excel sheet. There's unfortunately some issues that go along with these pre-built web scrapers. The first one being that this pre-built one, at least Octoparse, costs about $84 US dollars a month in order to maintain a license. The pre-built Indeed web scraper on Octoparse also did not gather important information that I require for this project, such as salary data. And when tasked to do all GIS jobs on Indeed for the particular day that I was looking at, and I went and checked, and there was roughly 24,000 hits during that time period, it only returned about 1,000 and required additional payment for each additional 1,000 to continue parsing. And you might have seen this little picture at the bottom there. It's a soup bowl with an HTML spoon and sparkles around it to tell you all that it is in fact beautiful. And this is where Beautiful Soup comes into, which is a Python library that has been proven to be able to scrape Indeed's websites. So to qualify the statement that I just made, we're going to take a very brief clip from a YouTuber. He's a data scientist named Mr. Fugu, showing the potential outcome from a Beautiful Soup or Beautiful Soup 4, which is the latest addition to Python's library, web scraping Indeed. So
today we're going to start with this, doing some parsing from Indeed, helping out a viewer. This should work for other parts of the world. And here's what we're going to get at the end of this video. We're going to turn that data after web scraping into this data frame or decide to save it. Let's get in.
So, and I wish that this was not popping up right there, but as you can see on the screen right now, Mr. Fugu, and he'll go on later in the video, I'm not going to play the whole thing. He'll go on to describe the code that he used and what kind of values that he was able to extract from Indeed. And he was successfully able to scrape the salary information, which is super important to this project, along with other information like the links to the job and also a brief description, which is not shown on the screen right now, that will be used to extract skills and other qualification metrics that I would like to measure for this project. Giving a brief intro into Beautiful Soup. Beautiful Soup 4, oh, 1 second. Sorry. Beautiful Soup 4 is Python's HTML and XML data parsing library. It can be custom built and updated to change with changing website characteristics, and is flexible enough to handle unique data requests, like I mentioned, salary, or just isolating skill information. The best part about it is free compared to Octoparse. It is built into the Python library, and it just needs to be installed into your Python environment. It is also a derivative of Python, which means that this system will be able to be integrated with the rest of the text-based analysis. With the rest of the text-based analysis that I plan on doing in Python.
Into it.
Oh, sorry about that.
Today we're going to start with this.
Okay. Sorry about that. Moving on to Python requirements for the technical requirements of this. This is usually where I lose my presenter view for just a second. I don't know why it does that, but anyways, other Python tasks outside of web scraping will include linking text with location. The output of the scraper, as you could see in the very brief video that I put out, or that Mr. Fugu put out, was that these will be names and texts of towns, cities, and states. This will need to be converted into a way that shapefiles can be created and then binned into their respective regions. The regions that I'm thinking about right now for this project are regions like Midwest, West Coast, East Coast, and then smaller into states, and then smaller even then into counties or cities. Text analysis of skill keywords or education qualifications will provide additional insight into particular experience that employers are looking for in a given area. This can also extend to the college education and other relevant info for those wishing to advance their career or increase their salary range. And this is the final section of the Python. Python, especially ArcPy, will play a pivotal role in creating the features users will be seeing on screen when navigating the web map. Automatically creating these features through the use of static scripts will ensure consistency in map production. Updating the map on a daily basis may also be possible through the use of a scheduler capable of handling such a large endeavor and also scheduling and running these scripts in the required order that they need to run into. Moving on to interactive web maps. So while coding will certainly be a very valuable mechanism for visualization and data storage, the interactive map will provide the functionality to take this project from just a visual resource to one that can actively be used to complete a job hunter's tasks. Ideally, the interactive map will not just display heat maps of salary info for certain job titles, but also have clickable information that will allow the users to dive a little deeper into the data set. Things like a drop-down list of jobs, salaries, links to the applications are desired for this project, but they may be curbed by the limitations of a web map engine itself. That said, I feel confident after working with an interactive web map professionally that I should be able to achieve this functionality in some capacity. An example that I provide on screen right now is a really great example of a interactive web map housing the data that I'm describing in terms of salary data. It's called the Interactive Median Income Map, and it's located on the Visual Capitalist websites. It provides an excellent example of not just salary info displayed, but also functionality that I desire in clickable and hoverable links working together with graphical dashboards through the engine called Tableau. So this brings us to the bigger question of which mapping engine should I be choosing? I haven't made this decision yet, but I am currently leaning towards something that I'm very familiar with, and that is the Esri products. especially since that ArcPy is also a derivative of their ArcGIS products. So integrating all of this information would be much easier if I stayed within one platform. That said, though, the final decision will be made during the testing stage as I integrate the data into a web app, and will be determined by the best fit. And by that, I mean the speed in which the map can be navigated, the functionality that comes with the mapping engine, the cost associated with maintaining a project like this. Things like that are going to determine what I use in the long run. And we're finally getting to the end of the project. This is a brief outline of my expected work schedule. The bulk of this project will consist of coding the web scraper to get exactly what I want in order to create these visualizations. And then after that, building an initial aggregate database to use as test data, but also a baseline for salary information, labor stats, and things like that that I want to visualize. If all things go according to plan, it's ambitious, but the work should be completed sometime mid-September to mid-October, which is just in time for the ERISA GIS Pro annual conference, where I am currently thinking about presenting this project. There are a few other venues that have popped up that I would be happy with displaying this project, but ERISA was something that my advisor, David DiBiase, recommended as the first go-to. This conference is touted as being something, being a great place to get exposure to projects someone is working on. And I believe that people there will find it extremely interesting. Exposure is definitely something that I'm looking for. And if the system I create is a resounding success, which I plan on it and I hope that it is, I believe this venue would be a great starting point for getting the word out. Future work is as I anticipate that this will be, in fact, a successful tool to add to the job searching universe. I plan on continuing to maintain it as I am able, which means past this course and also my master's. Upon launch, reaching out to partners to handle costs associated with things like server load or other development features will be key in order to continue developing this project. If all goes well, I don't see why this system should just be limited to GIS jobs and salary statistics and can span a traditional job searching website if the development is there. So thank you very much. I'd like to give a special thanks to my advisor, David DiBiase, for just talking out some of these things and bouncing ideas and really having an ear to get to where I am with this project. I didn't go over my credentials, but I'll briefly do so here. I'm a GIS specialist at the Virginia Institute of Marine Science. I work in the SAV Ecology Lab. We do an annual survey of the Chesapeake Bay for aerial imagery, where we're looking at seagrass. If you want to check out that interactive web map that I mentioned in the presentation, it's the SAV Interactive Web Map, located on the Virginia Institute of Marine Science. If you Google that, should be good. These are my emails. I'll also put my Penn State email into the chat when I'm done here, and follow me on LinkedIn. I'm trying to build some LinkedIn connections after neglecting that for a very long time. And I believe that I will be posting this map and this system to that LinkedIn eventually when I get it up and running. So thank you, everybody. These are my citations, and open it up to questions.
All right, Carrie, thank you very much. It seems like an incredibly practical application that you're developing here.
Thanks.
Looks like there's a few questions that have popped up in the chat. So if you could read through those, that'd be great.
Okay, so one from Marcella, which is great presentation and very interesting project, Carrie. I wonder if you envision any limitations or challenges particular to the data scraping part. Are there any limitations regarding the amount of data that can be downloaded? That's a great question. There are definitely going to be limitations to what I can actually get out of the website, depending on how it is listed in the HTML code. In that very brief video, I believe he It might have been the one that I had on there before, but there is a video by Mr. Fugu in which he walks through the HTML that's related to certain objects within Indeed's site. And you can see them highlight as you work your way down through the Explorer on what particular items and objects within that code relate to the objects that you see on screen during that time. That said, though, there is proven information out there that you can scrape salary information off of Indeed, at least. You can get the job location for sure off of Indeed as well. Scaling might be an issue, but that's something that will be worked out in development. This one's from Cynthia. Can the web scraping pull jobs that are remote or that will not hire remote? That seems to be a big topic that day. Yeah, that's a good question. It can definitely pull remote jobs. Actually, on Indeed, remote is listed in the location section. So when we're looking at data tabularly through a web scraped workflow, you'll actually see remote being in place of something like, Denver, Colorado, or, any other place in the US. As far as not remote, I don't think that there is a listing for that. There's hybrid remote, but I don't think that there is in Indeed's own internal submission standards. I don't think there's a checkbox that says we absolutely will not do remote for this job or something to that extent. But I do plan on including remote data into this project. I think that it's going to be like what I envision right now, lofty goals here, but what I envision right now is a map of the United States with this information. And then for those that are remote and strictly remote, not the hybrid remote will go to wherever the office is. Will be kind of like a circle off to the side of the map of the United States that somebody can click on, see job links, see what the salary expectations for those are, and be able to compare it to the rest of the binned polygons that I create. This one's from Jim. Nice project, Carrie. If you do use the Esri platform, you may want to look into the ArcGIS API for Python, which would allow you to append newly scraped data into your existing tables in an automated way. Recover that API in GOG 489. If that is the advanced Python class, I am going to be reaching out to you about that soon. For auditing purposes, I can't fit it into my master's right now, but I did, through researching web scraping, actually come across a Penn State page that was for the advanced Python class offered through the World Campus that directly references Beautiful Soup and the ArcGIS API. And I would be very interested in sitting in on that class, not for credit, but just for learning purposes. Web scraping is relatively new to me. I'm confident that I can get my system running with the amount of time that I've allotted myself and with the wealth of information that's out there right now. But I would be very interested to see what's going on with that. So I'll be in contact this week, I think, about doing something like that. Oh, sweet. Awesome. Thank you very much, Jim. Marcella, you might also consider using Leaflet through Python for web mapping purposes. I do think that Leaflet is I've looked into Leaflet a little bit. It's a very clean, fast web mapping engine. It also relies on JavaScript. I'm not sure how well all this Python information would be ingested into it. I could foresee, because I don't have much Java programming knowledge right now, I could see the Python outputting a product and then having it ingested through Java without having those two have to clash with each other all that much. And I also, through just word of mouth at this point, I've talked to some people that have used Leaflet. The functionality can be very basic on leaflet, and that might be wrong. That might be the bias and the people that I've talked to so far. But I'm looking at some complex things that can be done with it. And I definitely want the web mapping engine to at least be able to do some of those things. But Leaflet is definitely, if Esri is the number one right now, Leaflet is definitely number two in my mind at this point.
All right, Carrie, thanks so much for your presentation and informative question and answer discussion period.
Yep, I got one from Travis. Hey, Carrie, I use Beautiful Soup 4 to scrape KML files. Traversing the tag tree is extremely effective with Beautiful Soup 4. Oh, thanks. Yep, thank you very much. Sorry, that wasn't a question. I think we're good. I'm gonna stop sharing.
And want to put your contact info
Oh,
in the
yes.
chat? That'd be
Yep.
great. And then next up, we have Haley Fawcett. You want to start sharing your screen?
Yes. Yeah,
Great.
1 second.
All right. Yep, looks great on our end. So whenever you're ready, you can go ahead.
Perfect. All right. So hi, everyone. My name's Haley Fassett. For my project proposal, I will be discussing giant reed Arundodonyx and using the maximum entropy model to predict the spread of the invasive giant reed. So Arundodonyx commonly is referred to as the giant reed. This is a bamboo-like grass that can grow between 20 and 30 feet tall. You can see in the image that that's pretty tall with this person who's probably about 6 foot as a good comparison. This is a hydroponic plant that is found in disturbed environments such as stream banks. This invasive grass requires large amounts of water, and as a result, giant reed plant can often be found in locations that are near or at the soil surface for the water table. The giant reed is predominantly found in Mediterranean type climates, but can also be found in subtropical and semi-arid climate zones as well. In the US, it is commonly found in the southern half of the contiguous US along waterways in and near riparian ecosystems. So some background on giant reed is this weedy invasive grass was introduced to the US around the 1820s in riparian ecosystems as a form of erosion control in drainage canals. Today, giant reed is considered one of the most successful noxious weeds and in invaders of riparian ecosystems. So it's a very good at overtaking riparian ecosystems. The proximity to waterways and disturbed flood basins promotes the spread of giant reed because the rivers and streams transport clumps of giant reed plant matter and deposits them along the rivers and stream banks where giant reed can quickly reestablish and colonize those new areas. In the diagram, it illustrates the riparian ecosystem and its proximity to waterways. So this would be like your stream. And then in this area that's labeled as riparians would be where giant reed can invade. It predominantly does really well in this area, but it can, and I have a couple of pictures that do show it because it's an aquatic plant, can come down as far as the normal water level table, or it can also be found, approaching this high water level. So the giant reed, it commonly displaces native woody vegetation such as cottonwoods and willows, like I mentioned, in between the normal water levels and the high water levels. Giant reed is very successful with that close proximity to water, as that's very important for giant reed to be successful. So like again, just right around here. So in this picture, you can see that giant reed has established itself in that very shallow water bank. Once established in riparian ecosystems, giant reed plant can outcompete native woody vegetation by creating a monoculture of giant reed, thus reducing biodiversity in the ecosystem. Giant reed can displace the native woody riparian vegetation because it has a growth rate that is 3 to 4 times faster than the native vegetation and is 20 times more productive in these disturbed areas, such as flood banks and stream channels, which you see here. This is a giant mass of giant reed monoculture. As water is very important to giant reed, in areas where this evasion occurs, giant reed can also outcompete the native species for valuable resources like water, further promoting a monoculture of giant reed. In addition to creating non-native monoculture, it has also been observed that the invasive grasses, grass species in riparian environments have changed the environment to a post-fire and fire-promoting environment. Riparian environments historically act as natural fire breaks to wildfires, providing refuge from the wildfires and stopping, in many cases, the spread of fire to other neighboring environments due to the high moisture content of that native riparian vegetation. However, with the arrival of invasive grasses like giant reed, the fire regime has been transformed into an invasive plant fire regime cycle, which you can see here, and we'll talk about in a second. And an example of this phenomena was observed in the 2003 wildfire that broke out along the Santa Clara River in California. Areas that had a buildup of giant reed burned more intensely and acted as a corridor to spread the wildfire to neighboring shrublands. So in this picture here, right along this is the river. The fire broke out here. And because there was a lot of giant reed, it was able to jump across the river and spread into the neighboring shrublands. And this is everything in red is the extent of what was burned in the area. So after the fire, there were various studies done to track the recolonization of the area. Giant reed was able to outcompete and recolonize the area much faster than the native riparian species that were there before, because it's able to take advantage of the nitrate-rich soil and grow much faster. This creates a feedback loop that promotes fire because giant reed species are highly flammable, contribute to higher intense fires, and increase fuel loads. So the invasive plant fire regime cycle, this is a diagram up here. You can imagine this would be the giant reed that it first gets introduced in a small area. A fire breaks out. A lot of damage happens, and basically clearing a lot more of the area, allowing giant reed to invade much faster than the vegetation that was there before. So the spread of giant reed is much more extensive. And because of that, there's a greater area that is more vulnerable to having more fires in the future. So that's how you get to D, and you just keep doing that circle. To better understand the impacts of giant reed, it requires knowing which areas are vulnerable to giant reed invasions and where giant reed could spread to in the future. This will be accomplished by using Esri's presence-only prediction maximum entropy model to predict the spread of invasive giant reed. The results can be used to inform and improve wildfire mitigation, wildlife biodiversity, and riparian restoration efforts. So the study area I limited to the contiguous United States. However, the focus is going to be on those riparian and riparian-like characteristics to predict where giant reed could spread to. The site selection was also limited to the contiguous US because the invasive species was introduced at approximately the same time in the 1820s, and the governing body for environmental management and wildfire mitigation are all similar throughout at the federal and regional levels. This map here illustrates the giant reed observational data set that I'll be using as the core data set for the model, which is the maximum entropy model to predict the spread of where else giant reed could be. And the gold dots are known giant reed locations. So some habitat requirements for giant reed. So understanding the giant reed habitat requirements, this is very important because it's a key to having an accurate model, because this is very influential for giant reed. So water specifically, as I mentioned a little before, is very influential as a factor to promoting the spread of giant reed. So some of those key characteristics that are related to water, one of which is precipitation. Excuse me. Giant reed can be found in areas with annual precipitation ranging from 12 inches to 158 inches. Giant reed requires lots of water to grow and spread efficiently, so it does like a lot of rain. Soil moisture is also extremely important for giant reed. It grows best where the water table is near or at soil surface. Giant reed can transpire between around 56,000 acre feet of water over the course of a year. Just for reference, native riparian vegetation is roughly half that. So it's a lot more water. And it grows well in moist soils or substrates with loose type soils. The species utilizes a lot of water, as it's also been classified as a hydroponic plant, so it likes to be in the water. Also, the proximity to waterways such as streams is very important, not just for the transportation of the spread of giant reed, but also it's not found really farther than like 24 feet from those waterways, so it likes to be very close to that source. So some other habitat requirements that are more of the physical environment type, one of which is temperature. So the base growth temperature is reported between 44.5 degrees Fahrenheit with a maximum temperature of 86. It's found in those Mediterranean, subtropical, and semi-arid type climates. So it doesn't do well if it freezes for growing, but it also doesn't like extremely hot weather as well, but it does like it kind of hot. Land use is also very important. I'm not going to list all of them off, but it likes that wetland riparian type environment. Elevation is also a limiting factor for riparian or for giant reed. In the contiguous US, it's not found above the 5,000 foot elevation line. The elevation ranges regionally based on the latitude and the temperature profiles and water as well, but it's never found above that 5,000 foot elevation level. Slope similarly is very important. It likes relatively flat environments in order to spread really well. And so found on average between the 1 and 30 degrees. It can spread up a slope gradually, but if it gets too steep, it has a very hard time spreading. Fire boundaries is also very important just because it has been identified that in these areas that have recently burned, because giant reed can establish much faster in those areas because it can take advantage of that nitrogen rich soil. That's also a contributing factor to the ability to spread much more efficiently. So let's talk about the data sets that are needed. So all the data sets that are going into this model are related to those characteristics of the giant reed. So the maximum entropy model also relies on those known locations of subset population, in this case, the giant reed observational locations and the study area boundary, which is the contiguous United States. And the explanatory variables, which are those various data sets that relate to the characteristics that promote the growth of giant reed and the spread of giant reed. To list those off that we talked about earlier: precipitation, soil moisture, temperature, the fire boundary, land use, proximity to water, slope, and elevation. And then down here you can see this is our known giant reed locational data set. So the presence only prediction maximum entropy model works by using maximum entropy approaches to estimate the probability of presence of giant reed. In more simple terms, what is the probability giant reed could inhabit an area or spread to an area? One reason this model in particular was chosen over other models is the maximum entropy model does not require the use of non-present locations or explicit locations where giant reed is not located. This data does not currently exist and would be very difficult to get an appropriate sample size collected. For other predictive models, this input is required. Because of that, that makes the maximum entropy model better suited to determine where else giant reed could spread to. The maximum entropy model was also chosen over site selection analyses because this model is more robust than a site selection analysis, despite the fact that it does combine all of those various data sets that are related to habitat requirements. The habitat requirement data sets are not just being stacked in the model like you would in a site selection. Instead, the maximum entropy model is using machine learning to find patterns between the data so it can identify areas that meet some requirements and weights the probability based on statistical analyses like linear regression to determine the percentage giant reed could invade an area. A site selection uses more of an all or nothing approach, which can miss those complex relationships between the various variables. So like I mentioned, this model is using machine learning to train the model on the data sets, patterns, and build a better prediction model prior to running. So meaning all of those habitat requirement data sets will be analyzed for relationship patterns of influence on the giant reed observations prior to actually running. How that's actually done is 10% of the data is being used to train the model with what they call training data sets. And those are going to be subsets of those habitat requirement data sets. And then 10% of the known locational data set which is that point data set, is used to validate the model to determine the ability to predict giant reed spreading to other areas. So how well the model runs. Some potential venue options to present at, one of which is the Esri User Conference, which would be for the July 2024. This project utilizes Esri's fairly new released presence-only prediction maximum entropy model with a real-world application, making this a great venue to present at. Another possible venue option is the Esri Federal GIS Conference. This conference is geared towards those that are solving GIS problems with the regional and federal level. As my results are ideal to inform those making those regional and federal level decisions when it comes to environmental assessment and planning, that makes this a great platform as well to present at. So for timeline, as most of my venues are not, excuse me, sorry, let me start over. As the venues I would like to present at are not until next year, I plan on taking JOG 596B in spring of next year, so 2024. Once this class ends, I will start post-processing my data sets, and then I will need to start training the model, where I will iteratively change and evaluate the model parameters until the final model has the lowest root mean squared error and statistical p-values. The project needs to have confirmed results by the end of this year. And I outlined kind of more in depth of what those key milestones are. You'll notice that the training of the model will take the most amount of time, followed by just normalizing the different data sets so they can be ingested into the model. Will take kind of the second big chunk of time. Some anticipated results. So the results will be a map that predicts the presence of giant reed in the United States. This will be a graduated symbols map with darker colors representing higher probability of giant reed presence in locations. Based on the characteristics of giant reed and those habitat requirements, I anticipate the largest areas of giant reed being close to rivers and in the lower United States, so California all the way down to Florida, or all the way over to Florida. I also anticipate higher areas of concentration of giant reed in locations that have recently experienced wildfires. So to end, I'm going to end with just a personal story for why I chose this topic. So about 5 years ago, when I worked for USGS, I was able to firsthand observe giant reed plant encroaching on riparian ecosystems along the Sacramento River and American River in Sacramento, California, and observed the implications and the changes of these riparian ecosystems. This has become more relevant as various feedback loops continue to promote the spread of giant reed and they're going unchecked. I intend for this project to inform those that want to understand the implications of giant reed on riparian ecosystems and potentially implement mitigation plans to minimize the spread of giant reed. So thank you all for your time. This was my project.
All right, Haley, thank you very much. That was a great presentation. While we're waiting for questions to pop up, I have a question for you. I noticed in your data layers that you mentioned or listed soil moisture content.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any evidence to support the idea of using soil type as a factor?
So kind of the opposite. It does like loose soils, but it it almost doesn't really care what type of loose soil as long as it's some sort of loose soil. And then the moisture content being a really big driver, but just by it being that loosely compact soil just allows it to like reestablish, because the way giant reed spreads is little clumps will float down, and then once they kind of just land on that loose soil, they're able to like root themselves in and spread out. It's not so much on type, but I would assume, anything that's not loose, like if it was clay, it's not gonna be able to do very well.
Right. Yeah, I didn't know if there'd be another way to help train the model by looking at soil type or not, but
potentially,
yeah.
Yeah, I think more if I could just find a soil type of data set that lists out those loose soils. So potentially if it's soil types, you can kind of identify like which ones tend to be more loosely compact than others. That would definitely be another good one. One I didn't mention that on here is potentially using like the climate classifications, just because it really is only found in those, Mediterranean, semi-arid climates. So that is definitely like a limiting factor, just kind of a composite of, temperature and precipitation anyways. But just another more data sets just only improve the model.
All right. Looks like you have a question in the chat.
Sorry, I need to scroll down. Oops, on the survey. Sorry, I'm just getting comments.
There's a question from Claudette about.
Are there any animals that use giant reed, like any birds? It has not come up in my study. Everything that's come up on giant reed as it pertains to that like biodiversity of the riparian ecosystems is it doesn't really support anything and actually takes away from those other species that do, promote a healthy ecosystem. So the fact that it's basically outcompeting those very important species that actually kind of it's doing the opposite. It's not actually helping out the health of any sort of animals or organisms. Was it easy to find the data sets about the data about giant reed? So there's actually a lot on giant reed, specifically before the wildfire cycle. There's a lot out there just because it has for a long time been creating that monoculture in these riparian ecosystems. So that portion was not hard to find. There's a lot of info out there. And then as far as like characteristics, I tended to look towards like BLM and the Forest Service have a lot of, they go over the characteristics because they're trying to mitigate that specific invasive species, because at least in California, it's one of the highest noxious weeds. So it's definitely monitored really heavily in California. So it wasn't hard to find a lot of those characteristics. And I just took them from a bunch of sources just to make sure they all kind of lined up. So you didn't have any, outliers of what the characteristics are, just because a lot of it will be based off of that. Finding the actual data sets was a bit more tricky. Some of them were easier than others, but trying to get, because these are all going to be rasters. So there will be some post-processing on that just to get them all lined up. And I would like to, smallest cell size as possible amongst all of the data sets. So that part's a bit more tricky, but the actual characteristics were not too hard to find and validate.
All right. So Haley, if you can put your email in the chat window.
Yeah.
And contact you later if they have any follow-up questions. Thanks again for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
And next up, we have Cynthia Williams. Cynthia, if you want to start sharing your presentation, that'd be great.
Yeah, just give me a moment, please.
That's fine. All right, looks pretty good on our end. All right. So whenever you're ready, Cynthia, go ahead and begin your presentation.
Hello, everyone. My research proposal I'm doing is a study of inflow prediction using a random-based forest forecast on the Hoover Dam. And the reason for my study is because the West has been experiencing a mega drought for the last 23 years that can have an effect on the energy production produced by hydroelectric power. And here's just an overview of my PowerPoint, introductions, objectives, methodology, project timeline, and any questions and my references. So hydropower is both the oldest and largest form of renewable energy in the world. At the end of 2019, 2,207 hydropower facilities with a combined generating capacity of 80.25 gigawatts were active in the United States. In the US, hydropower generation is only 6.3% of the nation's energy production, but 31% of the US total in renewable electricity production. As you can see in the top image, it shows the distribution of conventional hydroelectric plants. What is a conventional hydroelectric plant? It's a plant in which all power is produced from natural stream flows as regulated by available storage. Every state in the US except for Delaware and Mississippi has a conventional hydroelectric facility. There are three types of hydropower facilities: impoundment, diversion, and pump storage. And the second image is an impoundment type hydro facility. It's typically a large hydropower system that uses a dam to store river water in a reservoir. Then water is released from the reservoir flows through a turbine, spinning it, which in turn activates a generator to produce electricity. The Hoover Dam is an impoundment because it's impounded by the Colorado River. So the Hoover Dam is a concrete arch gravity dam that is 726.4 feet high and 1,244 feet long. It's one of the largest hydroelectric installations in the US, located between Arizona and the Nevada border. It took 5 years to build. The nameplate capacity of the Hoover Dam is 2,080 megawatts. Nameplate capacity is basically just the total generating power that the Hoover dam can produce. The primary purpose of the dam is to control the waters of the Colorado River during flood periods, eliminating yearly threats of flood damage to the fertile regions below the dam. Also, the dam in Lake Mead provides storage of annual runoff of the Colorado River, thereby assuring a stable water supply for irrigating hundreds of thousands of acres of land in Southern California, Southwest, and Central Arizona. The table below shows the hydraulics and hydrology characteristics of the Hoover Dam. So how does the Hoover Dam work? Basically, electricity is generated by hoists at the top of the intake towers. It raises and lowers the gates below, drawing water from the reservoir. Then the water rushes through the headers and down the huge pipes called the penstocks to the powerhouse, where the water flowing at a rate of 2,000 to 3,000 cubic feet per second operates 17 main turbines that spin in the generators that create electricity. There's actually 9 on the Arizona side, number of turbines, and 8. I go back to my other slide to show you. Here, these are the intake towers, these 4 circular towers here, and then down here are the generators that are producing the power. Lake Mead. So Lake Mead was formed by the Hoover Dam. It's the largest reservoir in the US. It has a maximum surface elevation of 1,229 feet, and basically gets its water from the Colorado River, which provides 97% of the inflow. The remainder coming from the Las Vegas Wash, which you can see on the lower left of this image, and the Virgin and Muddy Rivers on the upper image up here. And the rest comes from the local precipitation and groundwater. The Colorado River Basin. So the Colorado River flows 450 miles from the Rocky Mountains all the way to the Gulf of California. And it gets 90% of its river flow from the snow melts from the headwaters in Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, and New Mexico. 7 states rely on the Colorado River as a water source. The river basin is divided into the upper and lower basin, and each state is allocated a certain amount of water. And this image here just shows you the allocations. The upper basin is based on a percentage amount in uncertainty years, and then the lower one is just how much based on 7.5 million acres per feet for the lower basin. Climate change impacts. So why is this important? 20 million people rely on water supply and other resources that may be adversely affected by climate change. The image on the left shows the last time Lake Mead was at full pull, which was July 6, 2000. The picture on the right shows when the water levels on the top near the Virgin and Muddy Rivers up here, and then on the lower left here, the Iceberg Canyon and Great Basin were low. Shows you big changes. Here is just a chart showing the decline of Lake Mead's elevation. So it's been on a downward trend for 22 years. And then when it was recorded in June 2022, it was at 27% capacity. And that's the lowest it's ever been since 1937. So what has caused this effect? The West has been in a mega drought for the last 22 years. The mega drought is also called the millennium drought. And this caused increased temperatures and changes in precipitation patterns that reduced the average runoff by 8 to 10%. It also caused reservoirs to evaporate quickly. And since the 2000s, the Colorado River Basin has been declining almost 20% annually. And the result of that, Lake Mead has a 2 in 5 chance of falling into the most severe management conditions, which forces downstream users to reduce water usage, meaning less water for downstream communities that rely on it for drinking water, agriculture, irrigation, and electricity generation. And you can see in this image here where Lake Mead it was the most extreme drought conditions here. So the planning of electricity production is critical to the long-term viability of the Hoover Dam, and the current production planning is determined by inflow projections. And human activities and climate change pose a threat to inflow forecasting. So what is inflow forecasting? It's a preliminary step in reservoir operations, providing guidelines and rule curves for optimal water allocation to satisfy water supply, irrigation, industrial, hydropower, and environmental conservation requirements. And there are two existing literature that refer to approaches in energy power or EP forecasting. One is statistical and economic metric models and machine learning. And for this study, I'm using random forest space as a viable method for inflow prediction. So why is this important? Well, the reduction in water quality reduces electricity output. Lake Mead's elevation must remain at 1,000 feet for Hoover Dam to function normally. If it falls any lower, it would cost money to replace the turbines in order to operate at a lower elevation. Otherwise, there would be no power. So the goal of my study is to employ machine learning to aid in accurate inflow predictions. By using a forest-based forecast study, and it will employ to project hydroelectric power generation at the Hoover power plant using a time series data derived from monthly plant gross power generation and monthly water generation from 1968 to 2022. And this is just my study area of showing of, this was when Lake Mead was at full pull, and then the location of the Hoover Dam. You can see it's literally in between Arizona and Nevada state line. The data that will be used to perform my analysis is a point shape file of the Hoover Dam in UTM zone 11, NAD 83. The attribute values for the shapefile will be a time series data of the Hoover power plant monthly gross generation and the monthly water generation. Data from 1945 to 2023 are available from RISE, which is the Bureau of Reclamation's information sharing environment. Time series data from 1968 to 2022 will be used for the study. So my analysis method. For part of my research, it will include a time-space cube from a defined location using time series data as variables. And the result of the time cube would be used in a random forest space forecasting that is used to forecast future time slices of that space-time cube. So the space-time cube. So the data prep and analysis will be done in ArcGIS Pro. A space-time cube shows how a phenomenon changes over time within a geographic space. In a space-time cube, each cube represents a time slice. And the timestamp on the top of the cubes are more recent, and the timestamps on the bottom of the cubes are older. You can see temporal changes in the region by looking at the time slices from bottom to top. So basically for my time cube, it'll be the XY coordinates is the Hoover Dam coordinates, and the vertical bins are the times, which will be in monthly, as my data is in monthly. And this is just a forecast model of a random forest space forecast. So a random forest forecast model predicts time future slices of the space-time cube using the value of each position in the Hoover Dam time cube. And the random forests are built from the subsets of the data, and the final output is based on the average or majority ranking, which eliminates problems of overfitting. Like you see here, it takes the each value, the data values training, and then it gets the average, which fits to that value, and then with that, using that average to predict the forecasted value, basically. Considering that reservoir water levels determines how much hydroelectric power is produced, meaning less water, less power. I believe that the random strategies of picking decision variables and assembling of elite candidate trees are resistant to overfitting is leading me to assume that the RF model may be accurately predict future inflows. And this is just my time schedule. So basically I would complete my random based forecast analysis from May to June. And then I will finish my paper in June, July, and then I will present it at the South Florida MGIS Expo in August. And also this is a picture I took when I was actually at the Hoover Dam, and this 3 years apart. So these are actually the inflow towers that on top of here where it's generating the electricity to move the gate up and down so the water can flow into the turbines. And you can see this white marking on the rocks. They call that a bathtub ring, where it's calcium carbonate and other mineral compounds may, including salt water, stick to the sandstone and leave this white mark. And then on the left is just a picture of my hat that I lost because it was a very windy day. And my questions and my references.
All right, thank you very much, Cynthia, for your presentation. Great job, great job. Looks like you have it looks like you have a question in the chat window.
For the actual levels that increased, it did go a little higher towards the end of the year. It's increasing, but it's still kind of low. But then again, also now California area and the Nevada is kind of experiencing kind of extreme weather right now. So there's been a lot of snow and rain.
Yeah, so one of the questions I had was, are you going to tie precipitation amounts, changes to, as part of your study? I know you're looking at water levels in the lake, but is there any kind of association then that you're examining with precipitation for your for your study period?
I actually haven't thought about that, but there have been other studies before that uses that climate like precipitation in their variables to predict for inflow predictions.
All right, thanks. Well, if you want to put your contact info in the chat window, so if someone wants to get a hold of you later and ask questions, you can do that.
Okay, I'll just stop sharing my screen.
All right, thanks. All right, so next up we have Miranda Heckler.
Hello, can y'all hear me okay?
Yep, we can.
Okay. Let's share my screen.
Well, that's pretty.
Thank you. I did not take that one myself.
Oh, so that's a beautiful picture then. Wow, okay.
I did not take that one. Okay, can you see my slides okay?
We can, and we hear you loud and clear. So whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you. All right, so hello everybody. My name is Miranda Heckler, and this is my capstone proposal presentation. These are the topics that we will be going over during my presentation today. We will be starting with some background information first, go over a brief overview of my project, highlight some of the literature review, and also share my expected timeline, and then leave some time at the end for any questions. Okay, my project area is in the state of Virginia, and being born and raised here, I'm no stranger to the state's diverse regions and beauty. I've always loved being outdoors. I'm a hiker, backpacker, and a camper. Virginia has 41 state parks, and they are all located between the Atlantic Ocean and to the Appalachian and Blue Ridge Mountains. There are over 682 miles of established trails in the park systems, with new parks and recreational areas under development. It's over 630 miles just to Washington, D.C. to Atlanta, Georgia, so you can see that the park system has a lot of miles to maintain. Almost 8 million people visited the park system in 2021. Hiking is a primary activity of the parks, and it provides an economic boost to the localities with day hikers and campers spending money at the local stores and restaurants. Local maintenance to the trail system is vital to sustaining that infrastructure. It's really impractical for the park system's limited staff to physically monitor all those trails. Fiscal restraints from reduction of funding from the state and federal sources is another obstacle that the park faces. In November 2021, the park system reported an estimate backlog of maintenance projects exceeding $289 million. Project trail maintenance cost at an annual cost is $1.4 million. All these factors contribute to delayed maintenance, which means portions of the trails degrading at a rapid rate due to erosion, neglect, and weather. Currently, Virginia State Parks does not have a system that I know of for hikers to report issues found on the park trails, and that is where my capstone presentation idea came from. I plan to create a GIS trail incident reporting system that will engage the public to identify trail segments requiring maintenance. The creation of a crowdsourced system will allow the public to report issues and help staff prioritize repairs. As an avid hiker, I have firsthand experience with trail maintenance issues. Westmoreland State Park is located on the shores of the Potomac River. It is an historic park, being one of the 6 original created in 1936. This park has been hit hard in the past several years with erosion, collapsed cliffs, major storms, and aging facilities. Some of the park's major attractions, such as trails to Fossil Beach, are either permanently closed or taken offline due to safety concerns and loss of infrastructure. In January 2023, the park had permanently removed 7 of the cliffside cabins, due to road collapse from erosion. And this was some of our favorite spots to spend weekends with that beautiful waterfront view that you see on the slide there to the right. These environmental factors, together with a lack of resources and funding, have led to permanent closures of main trail systems. Landslides destroyed the trail boardwalks that connected 3 of the major trails and compromised 2 others. Personally, I love hiking this park, and several times I drove hours to yet be disappointed again for another trail that was either permanently closed or temporarily, and I had to turn around and go home. I've also run into impassable trail sections that were not closed and provided no alternative path. The ability to report this issue would have been beneficial to me as a hiker and to the park system for repairs. So why is this important? Research has shown that consistent maintenance is needed to sustain trail systems and improve user experience. A trail system that is consistently maintained has a lower total cost over time and is safer for users. The Rails to Trails Conservancy is an organization that is one of the largest trail systems in the United States, with over 24,000 miles of trails. They maintain the trail system with a large network of volunteers, trail managers, local governments, and federal assistance. Volunteers adopt trail segments to ensure they remain safe and viable for the public use. To help other organizations, the RTC provides a trail building toolbox as a model when addressing trail maintenance. They recommend organizations devise a system that allows trail users to report observed hazards and issues on the trail. Crowdsourcing has been defined as tapping into the public's collective experiences to solve a problem. It can help organizations identify problems and gather data from a large number of sources. Crowdsourced data is an inexpensive way to collect and happens in real time. Applications such as incident reporting and COVID tracking were great uses of this type of data collection. However, crowdsourcing has its limits, and it's not applicable when a great deal of expertise is needed to solve an issue. Crowdsourcing data is an effective way of gathering incident information from the public. Products such as Survey 123 is available from Esri that accommodates this type of data collection and integrates well with other GIS tools. Crowdsourced data applications are used for trail maintenance throughout the US. As early as 2013, the town of Amherst, Maine, saw the value in web-based crowdsourcing trail maintenance for reporting issues. The Amherst Trail Service Request app was developed by their GIS department for users like hikers, hunters, and outdoor recreation users to report the trail maintenance issue that they see via cell phone, tablets, or computers. The app is built on the town's GIS-based maps for conservation lands and trails, and the user taps on the map to load their GPIN, and then they enter the issue from a drop-down list. And then optional pictures can be attached, and then the ticket that they send goes to the appropriate department for resolution. There are also many types of crowdsourced data application, and it serves a host of needs. The National Parks System has the I've Got One app that tracks crowdsourced data on invasive species in the Florida Everglades. Yellowstone Explorer app tracks visitor sightings of animals and unique plant species in parks. In Japan, issues on trails on the Hokataka mountain range are entered via crowdsource app, and they also offer a QR code so you can donate funds to help their trails. Crowdsourcing offers a host of options to gather information firsthand from people using the resources. The goal of the GIS Trail Incident Reporting System is to provide a central database and portal for crowdsourced data from the public on trail incidents hazards throughout the park system. A high-quality user experience is key to the successful implementation and sustainability of my project. My expectation is that a prototype of a crowdsourced data application for GIS Trail Incident Reporting will be produced and used by the park system. A scenario-based design approach will be used for this application. The design scenarios will address various types of issues encountered in the parks. Some example of these are walking trail non-emergency, such as a tree down, safety hazards for immediate trail closure, such as a washout, and trail safety hazards like a hole or rut. These are only a few examples, but I plan to do additional research on different types and add that to the design. For the overall system design, Esri ArcGIS Pro will be at the core of the system. This will leverage the park system's current investment in ArcPro and will allow for the import of existing map systems. Survey 123 will be used to develop the survey tool for crowdsourcing mobile data input. A link or QR code located on trail maps or trailhead signs can be scanned by the user, and that'll take you directly to the series of options to report the problem. And then G-pinning your location will be added to the survey as well to provide location information. Staff within the park will need access to this data. Dashboards within ArcGIS are easily configurable and provide information for quick decisions by staff. They quickly integrate with ArcGIS maps and associated applications. Some of the strengths of dashboard systems are that it's easy for staff to understand. They provide a quick development path. They're interactive and configurable for system integration. With the use of that dashboards, staff can monitor the incident reporting on trails in real time. Before application design can begin, a unified modeling language diagram has been prepared for this review. This UML design follows 3 core components in the system known as actors. The designer is a primary actor and handles system design, testing, portal refinement, and final release. Once the application is launched, there are primary actors consisting of park visitors, and then secondary actors consisting of park and maintenance staff that will utilize this application. To be successful, it is vital that the site be user-friendly and easy for the average user to quickly G-pin their location to report an issue. It's necessary that no prior knowledge or experience with GIS systems and mapping are required. The Survey 123 application is intuitive and allows users to pinpoint their location and create a summary of issues from dropdowns for commonly known issues. An option to provide pictures of the incident report will be available. Staff will be provided access to the reporting system for incident and associated documentation. The reports will show the date of the incident, the park trail name, the status of the incident, G-pin, a description, and optional image. Staff will be able to use these incident reports for maintenance, dispatch, trail closures, and hazard alerts for hikers. Some of the challenges of this project I can see would be time and scale of the project during the capstone period, data accuracy of crowdsourced data, and then reluctance of the park management to allow testing to be in the park. The timeline of my project begins in March. Once the project proposal has been presented for peer review, I will begin incorporating the feedback. In April and May, the database will be designed and data imported. I will create GIS tools and mappings needed. Coding will be done for the Survey 123 application. I will design the sample reports for the prototypes. In June, field testing of the application will be tested in a park. I am proposing that testing be at Westmoreland State Park in Montrose, Virginia, or Pocahontas State Park in Chesterfield, Virginia. I will gather feedback on ease of use from the volunteers and participants that I'll have. Bugs will be corrected. I will prepare a final data report for review by the park staff and then finalize prototype project. In July, I will prepare final project report for this capstone, and I plan to present the project to either the State Park Trail Advisory Planning Office or a member of the park operations managers. Here is a screenshot of some of the resources that I used during the planning process for the capstone. And that is it for me. Does anyone have any questions?
All right, Miranda, great job. Seems like a very, very practical application you're developing.
I think so.
One question I had, you mentioned in terms of the user testing, which I'm really glad to hear that you're thinking along those lines of getting input and feedback for your interface design and functionality.
Mhm.
So one question I had is, you mentioned possibly 2 parks that you were thinking of in terms of getting some feedback.
Mhm.
Have you thought a bit, and this may be a bit premature here, but have you thought a bit more about possibly identifying parks that have different kinds of trails? And my thinking here is that different trails may call for different kinds of hikers who would need
Mhm.
different kinds of functions for your application.
So are you referring to like a trail that equestrians can go on or biking, or are you referring to like an easy or moderate or hard trail?
Well, that's all encompassing, right?
All of it?
Yeah, because I mean, your app isn't just like one size fits all. I mean, it would necessarily
Correct.
be different users with different kinds of expectations are going to be using your app. So
Of issues.
from my standpoint as someone that would look at user testing, I'd want to consider a greater swath of hikers or trail users to get their input on what kinds of functions and interface designs would be most appropriate for them.
I completely agree. Good point. I have thought of some of the different users that would be perhaps using this survey or application, and that is within my scenario-based design.
Okay.
I have a bunch of different examples that I've looked at, like equestrian use or issues of a mountain biker, or even individuals that are hiking with their pets. So I have thought about that in my user scenario-based design, and I'm hoping that I can get a couple of different varieties of volunteers, because I think that variety is important.
Yeah, I'd 100% agree with that. So I'm glad you're thinking along those lines. Looks like you might have a couple questions in the chat window.
So Adrian says, looks like a really useful app. You mentioned park staff may be reluctant to allow testing the park. Why might that be so? It's just that's just a perhaps. I want to think that they would want everyone's user experience to be heightened, and if they can, great. But I always want to have that on the back burner and back in my mind that they might not want it to be tested in the park at first. So I just want to make sure that I have that in the back of my mind, and I'll maybe have a plan B. Hopefully that answers. Richard, do you have a method for identifying likely duplicate incidents to keep the backlog from getting overwhelming for park staff? So I have thought about that. I don't have an answer for that quite yet. So in a class prior to this one, that was mentioned as maybe something to look into. So I'm hoping that I can maybe find a resolution for that as I go on with my project. Doesn't look like I have any more in the chat.
No, I think you're good. So maybe you could put your email in the chat window for
Yes.
folks to contact you at a later point.
No problem. Thanks you guys for listening to my capstone project.
Yeah. All right. One quick thing here. For those of you that are presenting, make sure to complete the peer review evaluation form. I put the link in the chat window. And then last up we have, let's see who is up, Cynthia Valen, I believe.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, good. I've been having difficulties with this all month, so I'm glad it's working today. Let me do a screen share.
So far, so good. You see your
We're getting there.
PowerPoint window.
How's that?
Yep. So
Good.
whenever you're ready, go ahead and begin.
Okay. So hello, everyone. I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit about myself. My name is Cynthia Vallon. I am a geographer and GIS analyst at the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam, Hawaii. I provide GIS support to aid in the progression of unresolved missing in action cases from the Vietnam conflict for my agency's researchers, archaeologists, and recovery teams. I have a bachelor's in geography from the University of Hawaii at Manoa and a post-baccalaureate certificate from Penn State. I've completed a year internship, GIS internship with the city and county of Honolulu while attending UH. After I graduated, I moved to Nevada where I work at NAS Fallon with my very first GIS job, working for the operational range clearance team, providing GIS support. And then I picked up a position in asset management with the GeoReadiness Center, the Navy GeoReadiness Center in Fallon in 2010. In 2017, I accepted a position with the Navy GeoReadiness program in Naples, Italy, where I provided GIS and data collection services for the Europe, Africa, and Central region. So most of my background has been in asset management. So as you can see, GIS in conjunction to history and archaeology is very new for me. And so that is why I chose this project. My advisor is Patrick Kennelly, and my capstone project is to show how spatial analysis is used during archaeological investigations of POW MIA from the Vietnam War. In this presentation, I will go over the purpose of this project. I will describe the study area and what makes this location unique for an archaeological investigation, and I will describe the data and methods that I plan to use to complete this project. This project will demonstrate how GIS and spatial analysis can be used to enhance investigation leads for an archaeological field survey along a riverbank. I selected a case that requires a temporal analysis of various decades of imagery to illustrate the fluvial geomorphology of the Tu Bon riverbank near Hoi An in the Quang Nam province of Vietnam. My hope is that this workflow is adopted by the interdisciplinary investigation teams to follow when working up leads for field investigations involving missing in action personnel. Currently, these investigations, they rely solely on where a witness says a burial location could be or an incident had occurred, and not much spatial analysis has been done with many of these cases. And so I would really like to have this process adopted into their investigation processes. So you might ask, what is geomorphology? Geomorphology is how environmental factors such as rain, wind, earthquakes, volcanoes, and plate tectonics shape the terrain of our world. Fluvial geomorphology is how rivers shape the land, including the movement of sediments, the sinuosity of the river, and the growth of vegetation within river basins and catchments. The project location is in South Central Vietnam on the Tu Bon River Plain. It is located 27 kilometers south of Da Nang, Vietnam in the Quang Nam province. The Tu Bon is an anti-branching river near the town of Hoi An and diverts the main channel of water flow and rejoins the river downstream. The geography of central Vietnam consists of mountainous areas which progress down towards the South China Sea, across Midland Hills, coastal plains and dunes, and the coastal islands offshore. The topography of this project's area of interest has lower elevations in the coastal plain and dunes area. It is prone to heavy monsoonal rains, extreme flooding, and economic devastation due to the severe flooding during the rainy season, which is September through December. Tropical depressions sometimes attack the eastern coast, resulting in heavy rainfall. This is mainly because the central coast, especially the coastal areas, have a great deal of rain in October through December. And because of this, major floods occur in the Tubon River Plain. The flooding and the rushing waters over the years have changed the terrain of this location. An example is in 1999, there was a major flood event in the Tubon River Plain. This map was made by a field reconnaissance team showing the geomorphological features of the Tubon River in the year 2000 after the big flood event. So this is a clip from a command diary report about the incident. So this incident involves a search and recovery mission by the 1st Marine Division on May 29, 1967, for a Marine Corpsman 3rd class who went missing in action. The medical group to which this Marine was attached was crossing the Tubon River by several boats. When the boats reached midstream, they received heavy volume of small arms and automatic weapons fire from an undetermined number of the enemy. The boat in which the Marine was riding overturned, and he was thrown into the swift current of the river. Due to the swiftness of the current and the intensity of the enemy fire, the recovery attempts for this individual was unsuccessful, and he was presumed drowned. In 2005, a witness who was part of the Vietnamese guerrilla ambush, also known as the Viet Cong, came forward and identified a burial location where he said he had buried a body after it had washed ashore. The location he identified was partially underwater on the point of a sandbar. There was a disagreement between he and the investigation team interviewer concerning the movement of the riverbank and the sandbar over the past 40 years. So as you can see in these two images, one from October of 2002 and the other October 2007, that the shoreline in this brief period has changed a lot. Even in the same month, the sandbar from 2002 is now completely underwater in the image from 2007. This is a photo of the sandbar taken by one of my colleagues, Buddy Newell, in 2011 during a routine visit to detect if encroachment of the investigation site was present. In this image, he was facing east with the bridge at his back. The witness identifies the burial location on this sandbar at the far end. As you can see in these two images, the 1968 image of the river does not resemble the current Esri world imagery. It will be interesting to see the movement of this river over time. So my project involves measuring the change of the shoreline between May of 1967 to present, where the witness says he had buried the remains. I will gather location data from the wartime command reports and from past field investigations by the Joint POW MIA Accounting Command and the Central Identification Laboratory of past field investigation reports. I will also acquire wartime aerial imagery from the National Archives and Records Administration and the USGS Earth Explorer, as well as more current satellite imagery from Digital Globe to use as visuals to mensurate the changes in the shoreline. I will also map out the built areas along the shoreline over the years to show how the construction of bridges and shoreline farms have also modified the riverbank. I will be collecting reports and imagery from various sources. Incident reports and command diaries can be found at the Vietnam Center and Sam Johnson Vietnam Archives. as well as from the National Archives and Records Administration. I already have collected some imagery for this study from NARA, but more is needed to complete this time series map. I will obtain the additional imagery from Digital Globe and the USGS D-Class imagery collection of surveillance satellite imagery. The type of data I hope to retrieve from Texas Tech are reports of the mission on May 29th, 1967, as well as command chronology reports and search and recovery reports. Even though the body was not recovered during the mission, a report is almost always submitted for missing in action. The University of Texas at Austin has a map collection of all the Army Mapping Service 1 to 50K topo maps. These maps and other map collections can provide clues as to what and when something has been built over the decades. As I had mentioned earlier, I already have a small collection of imagery from the National Archives that has already been obtained for this location. I can use these as a starting point for my project. The archives also have a collection of records and information documenting the U.S. experience in the Vietnam conflict. I can probably find more mission-related documentation there. The USGS Earth Explorer holds a collection of imagery from the early days of satellite surveillance and reconnaissance. These images were originally used to make the topo maps for U.S. intelligence agencies during the war. These images have been declassified and are a valuable resource to provide a record of land surface change. I can also pull imagery from the Landsat 5 collection for the time period of 1984 to 1999. Even though these data sets have lesser resolution, they still may provide enough to illustrate any changes that have occurred in the Tubon River. I will also obtain more current satellite imagery from Maxar Technologies satellite constellations. They have 4 satellite constellations in orbit and 3 decommissioned satellites. Digital Globe hosts the imagery that is obtained from these satellite constellations. I will pull imagery from there I will pull imagery from here for this time period of 1999 to present. So one of the challenges of using historical imagery is that nothing has been georeferenced. And the challenges of georeferencing wartime and historical imagery is one that finding control points from 1965 that are similar to modern imagery is very difficult to find. So that's going to be one of the challenges, is the georeferencing because of that. And the second challenge will be that the images, even the satellite images, are oblique. And that obliqueness, when you georeference the image, causes some stretching. So that may be another challenge that I'll face. So I'm going to use Adobe Photoshop to prepare the imagery for use in ArcGIS Pro. Wartime aerial imagery and satellite surveillance imagery is usually oblique to the study area. I can review the imagery in Photoshop to select the best sample images for this study. I will then crop the images to the site location to make georeferencing more accurate. The Digital Globe imagery is not always on NADAR, so it also may need some adjustment in GIS. I can then georeference the selected images, topo maps, and any other location maps to identify the names of built areas over time. In ArcGIS Pro, I will also plot key locations pertaining to the incident that I obtained from the wartime documents and maps. Wartime coordinates will first need a datum transformation from Indian 1960 to WGS 84 before bringing them into GIS. And this is to standardize all of my data prior to analysis. I anticipate that the results of this study will show the possible and impossible locations to investigate relative to the witness identified location along the riverbank. And this image is this is not the particular location because they haven't excavated there yet, but if this location is proven to be a possible lost location, then an excavation such as this will happen. My deliverables will be an analysis report with maps that can be used to share with the ones who decide whether to investigate a location or not. The archaeologists and researchers for this case can use the results of this analysis to help them in future field investigations. I will also document the procedures used to complete this study so that other investigations similar to this one can follow the steps used. So this is my project timeline. We are currently in Geography 596A, and I am presenting my proposal today, March 14th, 2023. Up until Geography 596B, which I will take in the spring of 2024, I will be working to gather the data from the different sources that I mentioned earlier. This can take some time, especially from the National Archives, because a lot of it requires that you go visit them physically. Fortunately, I will be in DC in April, and I plan on visiting the archives then. And I plan on presenting this project in the 2024 Esri Federal GIS Conference in DC. And here is my bibliography. And that would be all. Does anybody have any questions?
All right, Cynthia, thank you very much for that presentation. That's a very noteworthy and timely piece in order to have closure, I think, for a lot of families that still have missing servicemen and women overseas.
Yes, I'm trying to figure out how to pull the page back up again. So we can see the notes. Oh, no.
Well, it looks like you have a question in the chat.
I'm trying to figure out how to find that. I had this all worked out before I came online. Oh, no. So how do I bring the chat back up?
If you go into the Zoom environment.
That's what I'm trying to find. Oh my. Well,
why don't you stop sharing first? There you go.
Oh, there.
And then at the bottom, there's a menu listing that says
I have it. Okay.
click on that.
Okay, so in the chat, let me find them. I've got, hi Cynthia, this is such a cool project. How do you intend to georeference orthorectify the digital globe imagery? I handle digital globe imagery for work. It is a bit of a headache to deal with. We have a workflow that involves rebuilding pyramids, pan sharpening in ERDAS, and orthorectifying in ERDAS. When we use ArcPro Ortho Workspace, it crashes the program. Could be user error. If you run into any of these issues, feel free to reach out. We have a working workflow for ERDAS at least. Oh, this is awesome. So I will definitely take down your contact information as I don't have ERDAS. I have, or in the past, I have taken the images since they are off Nader And I do have a workflow for just shifting the imagery just so that it fits better where it's supposed to be in conjunction with control points. But since my control isn't going to be exact, mainly because the wartime imagery is not going to really give me any good control either. It may not be necessary to be super precise. I just need to be precise enough to illustrate the movement of the riverbank and the shifting sandbars, which are quite large when I do my analysis. Do we have any other questions?
You know, not so much a question, but just a comment. I noticed that in your workflow, you'd mentioned something about needing to do a datum transformation from the Indy
Yes.
1960 datum. Depending upon what other maps or other digital or paper media that you come across, you definitely want to pay attention to the horizontal datum that's being used, because that area, especially with the different powers that I don't know, were part and parcel of Southeast Asia, imparted their own datums on that location. So yeah, the Indian 1960 has been used, but also the Tokyo datum.
Yeah, the Toy B.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the Hanoi datum, and the WGS 66 datum has been used. And in some cases, there may be the situation where the coordinates were just astronomically observed, so that it wasn't tied to a datum per se. So there could be some misregistration due to the fact that, yeah, you're working with a real soup of datums in that area.
Yes, I do agree. There is definitely a soup of datums, and most times during the reports, you know, the wartime reports, or even, you know, the investigation reports from the 1990s, nobody will mention what the datum was when they collected the coordinate grid. And
Yeah.
so that becomes a problem.
Yeah, so that's
So
just a little bit more investigation on your part that you'd have to probably undertake.
So Claudette Sandoval has a message. Let's see, just a quick anecdotal story. At these archaeological sites, they also find a lot of artifacts. And one group recently found my father's dog tags and sent them back to him. He left the tags on a child at a local orphanage in Vietnam when he left. Your work is very important. Thank you. Well, I appreciate that. And that's a really good story. Thank you.
All right. Cynthia, if you want to put your email contact in the chat for folks to hook up with you afterwards, that'd be great. Otherwise, I want to thank everyone for spending their afternoon, well, morning and afternoon with us. Big thanks to the presenters for all their hard work, and the advisors for helping them get through to this stage. Best of luck with 596B, and we will see you back here tomorrow at the same time for another round of 596A presentations.